G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Trewin. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Bradley Hamner from BlueprintOS based in Huntsville, Alabama, US. Thanks for your time today, Bradley.
Troy, great to be with you.
Let's start with how we know each other. Courtney on your team reached out earlier this year and thought you'd be a great guest to have on our cast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, love to be able to chat about what it means to become the architect of your business.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
So specifically, our business is called BlueprintOS. It stands for Blueprint Operating Systems. What we do is help people to become the architect of their business. And there is a framework that we use. It's not just a concept. There's actually 5 specific milestones that we use the word scale. If you're in business, most business owners want to be able to scale their business. So we use scale as an acronym for the 5 milestones of what it means to become the architect of your business. Say I transferred from being the rainmaker. Everything was dependent upon me when I first started my very first business. That business I still own to this day. And I transformed myself to becoming the architect. And what architects use? They use blueprints. And the thing that I needed to build that solved the issues that I had in my business is a blueprint operating system. Now, I didn't have the language at the time, but that's what we help people to be able to do, is become the architect by installing an operating system for the business to run on, so it's not fully dependent upon them.
And are there any particular industries you work with?
Everybody we work with is doing at least 300,000 in top line, up to 3 million in annual revenue. We feel like we really know that space because we divide that space into 2 distinct sections. 300,000 to a million. There are certain challenges that most every business faces to get from 300,000 to a million. And then the challenges begin to change when you're at a million up to 3 million. Now, several of our clients have been able to grow their business past 3 million at this point. But when people come in, they're at least doing between 300,000 and 3 million in top line revenue.
So any industry, what about any geographic areas you're focusing on? Is it just US?
Yeah, no geographic areas. Our audience primarily, through my podcast, is primarily based in the U.S., but we work with service-based industries. We really know that space more than we do, say, e-commerce or manufacturing.
Yeah, great. And it's fucking hard to let go of the rainmaker hat. So well done on doing that. Maybe just explain a little bit and then maybe run us through the 5 letters and scale. Explain that a little bit better as well.
Well, you wouldn't be congratulating me if you knew the story, which I'll briefly tell about how I got there. Ultimately, I almost left entrepreneurship. I started my business in 2010. My dad is a farmer. He's in agriculture. And so I knew the value, really taught from my father, the value of hard work. I mean, when you see your dad working 7 days a week, farming 10,000 acres, you just pick up what it actually takes to be able to run a business. And I took that into my business. That and the ability to sell, and it worked, Troy, until it didn't. I simply ran out of time. That business got to about $600,000 in top line revenue, all on my back. Now, I had a team that was servicing the accounts, but I was the primary rainmaker in that business. And simply, I ran out of time. And so I almost left. I thought I was having, almost left business. I thought I was having a heart attack. I ended up experiencing, in 2015, panic attacks. I didn't know what that felt at the time. I went and saw a physician. He sent me to a cardiologist, and cardiologist said, look, everything is fine, but you're 34 years old. I don't know what you're doing, but you might want to change it. And I didn't know what it would be to change. I mean, the lever I was pulling on, Troy, was work my tail off and sell. And it got it to $600,000 roughly in top line revenue, but it was not going to get it to say 1.2 million. I could not work any more hours. And fortunately, I found myself in Toronto. I was actually a strategic coach in a program, and I was next to an entrepreneur that was in a similar field, a similar industry to mine. He was a financial advisor, and I thought he was probably doing $750,000 in top line. And he said, well, we did 40 million last year and I made 5 million personally.
Wow.
And I was like, wait, what? that really surprised me. And he said something that I'm sure so many guests have said it on your podcast, and you've heard it for years yourself. Is he said systems and processes. The systems and processes. That's what it is. And I rolled my eyes and said something smart ass to him, and said, "Come on, man. I'm so sick and tired of hearing that," because I was frustrated at this point. I was so frustrated in the business. In fact, I looked at going back into the corporate world where before I started my business, and knew I could get a couple $100,000 salary. And so at the end of the day, he showed me. He showed me actually what he had done, and that is the thing that changed my life. But again, on the plane ride back, what more than anything, more than me starting to actually type out systems into a Word document, what mattered more than anything was the identity shift as I saw myself for the first time. Again, I didn't have language around this, but instead of seeing myself as the one doing all the things, I said, I'm going to go and build it. I'm going to architect it. I'm going to actually see it and design it first, and then everything else came from there.
And so that first business you started in 2010, what did the business do?
Oh, it was an insurance agency. Insurance.
Yep.
Yep. It
Great.
was an insurance agency, and it was built off of my contacts, like people I knew in the community. And so even if I wasn't the one selling it, directly selling it, the primary contacts, like I was the center of gravity for that business, if that makes sense, right?
Mm.
And so what would end up happening is customer requests and changes and issues, all of those type of things started to pile on top of me. And it was because it was working. I want to be very clear to people is that it's not like this one thing of like that wasn't working anymore. It worked and the business grew, but the business grew to a point to where it started to crush me.
Yeah. And panic attacks are scary things. I had a few of those after my mother died 19 years ago now. It's this month, actually.
Mm.
Yeah, not much fun. So you were able to obviously work through those.
Yeah, I was able to work through those. Yeah, I mean, I cut down on my caffeine for that period of time, but more than anything, is I started to. I'll give you a couple little specific things that I did. As I said, I have got to find some time to take off, and so I shut off Saturdays. I just said I can't work on Saturdays. I have young kids, and so I shut off Saturdays and Sunday mornings. And just even having that much space, just that much space, began to give me I had to make a commitment to myself that I wasn't going to work 7 days a week because I was following what my dad did.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell the story originally about my father is that that's what he did. He missed all of my games, and I just could see that I was following the same pattern that I had picked up from him, which look, there's a lot of value in hard work, and in entrepreneurship, like you do have to work hard. But typically for entrepreneurs, it's not an issue of like they're just not working hard enough. I mean, you do this and you see business owners and entrepreneurs all the time. I mean, it's almost never a volume thing. I just wasn't working on the right
Yep.
things.
Totally agree. And I had the same affliction, two very hardworking parents. So that's how I thought going into my first professional career for 3 years out of uni. The only job I ever had, and then my own business is just grunt work. Work really hard rather than working smart and putting boundaries in place, which I obviously have in place now. But it's taken a long time over that 25-year business journey to get better balance.
It does, and I didn't also have any other, I didn't have a mentor at the time. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have anyone that really was in a place to speak into me that I would actually listen. And so that's when I said, hey, like it came from a place of, I mean, if you've suffered from panic attacks, it's scary. It
Mm.
really is. It's a
Yep.
scary, it's a
You're having a heart
scary
attack.
feeling.
Mm.
It really does feel like you're having a heart attack. I mean, I remember that day very vividly, and it took a while for those to really subside. I mean, it wasn't immediate, and it took a while to change that business. I want to be very clear. It wasn't like I came back, stuck myself in a room for 3 days in a black room and or dark room and basically churned it out all of the operating system, and it was so clear and evident what I needed to do. But it took about a year and a half to really begin to flip that business to where everything wasn't dependent upon me.
Yep. Let's go back to how you started out. You mentioned that first insurance business, 2010. Maybe just go back a little bit further, college, university, corporate job, and then any other businesses up to now with BlueprintOS.
Yeah. So, um, after I graduated from college, I went to Auburn University. I got my degree in finance and I'll tell you the reason I'm sharing that specifically is I got my degree into finance. My dad's a small business owner. You know, I had good grades in university. And I say all of that to say that you would think that I would have all of the advantages initially in starting my business. Yet, and this is not an indictment on Auburn by no stretch, I didn't know what the hell I was doing when it came to my business financials. I didn't know how to read an income statement. I didn't know how to read a balance sheet. I was using Quicken, not QuickBooks. The first 3 years in business, my accountant said, "Hey, by the way, first year, this was actually my third year in business." He said, "You made a profit." I said, "Fantastic. How much is that profit?" And he said, 32,000. I said, "Where's that money?" I was dead serious asking him like, "Oh my gosh, I got $32,000 somewhere. Where is that money?" He's like, "No, that's your profit. It's not the same." And I was like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" I mean, I had a lot to learn about really running a small business. And so ultimately you can see kind of that path. And so got my degree from Auburn. I was in the corporate world. I was specifically in pharmaceuticals. That's the world that I was in. I was going to move up the corporate ladder. I was in sales and I was going to go into marketing for a period of time. Then you come back in and you're a regional manager, director, so on and so forth. And that was my path. And so when I say in 2015, 5 years into entrepreneurship, I genuinely picked up the phone and looked at and called some of my contacts to say, screw this. I got to make money. I'm making half of what I could go make and I'm working all the time. I think I need to go back and just get a corporate job. I know I'll be successful and could do it, but I said maybe I'll give it one more shot. And so ultimately those are some of the changes that have played in. Since then, I've actually that company, and along with 6 other businesses I've actually founded, had one business that did, quote, fail. And I use that in quotation marks because actually I think that businesses fail, entrepreneurs don't. I think they learn
Hmm.
and they move on. And so BlueprintOS, that agency, which I still have to this day, I have my podcast media company as a business, and we put that all in a holding company. I actually have equity in my father's company now at this point. So it's been interesting working with him to try to get him out of being the rainmaker mode. So ultimately he can transfer that asset down. He's 70. He's wanting to retire in the next 5 years. So we're actually working on installing an operating system, which has been an interesting case study of taking our principles of scale and actually installing it in the agriculture business. So that's certainly been a unique experience to do that. He's the only one, by the way, that's not in the service-based business that we work with, but obviously have some equity in that. And so my ultimate outcome is by 2030, I want to build that to 30 million, a $30 million portfolio or holding company by 2030.
Yep, fantastic. Yeah, in 25 years in small business, I started late 99. I've had 16 businesses, 30 business partners in 3 countries. So couldn't really spell the word focus early on, so much so that in the early 2000s, our holding company was called Opportunity Junkies Proprietary Limited. That was the actual legal name. We recognized we had a problem, but we didn't do anything about it. So I wish I could go back in time and have sharper focus, that's for sure.
I think that's such a great point that you make around sharper focus, both with multiple businesses, one, and two, even opportunities within one business.
Hmm.
See, I was just having this conversation today is that, let's just think about marketing strategies. There's digital marketing strategies, and let's just say you focus all in on just digital marketing strategies. There's so many different ways just digitally to be able to grow a business. And to your point, sharper focus, it actually is like, man, a business owner wants to do all of the things, but the reality is they can't execute on all of them. And my thesis, the reason why I don't just have Blueprint OS now is because we want to prove out the model of Blueprint OS, because I love to not just coach business. I love to not just do it. I love to do business. And so that's why I always want to have 5, 6, 7 businesses, because I think it's a proof study of what it is that we're teaching and talking about is actually working. Now, I'll take you back real quick. that interestingly, it was only maybe 7 years ago, 2017, 6 years ago, 2018 or so, that I would have told you, don't give up equity. Don't give up equity. So in a lot of those, having less than 50% minority stake, I don't have majority stake at all in my father's company. And so I think that that's an important distinction, but it proves out that if you have an operating system, something exists outside of you, and you have really great partners in those businesses, you can have a portfolio of different businesses. But if it's all dependent upon you, I mean, you can't have more than one.
Yeah, I used to be equity precious. I love that Chinese proverb. It's better to have the tail of an elephant than the body of an ant.
That's great. I'm stealing that one.
Yeah. We might swing our focus back to Blueprint OS. So, what year did you start that business, and how old were you?
Let's say I started, well, Blueprint OS started as me doing my very first two clients. I had a call from a friend, a really good friend of mine, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to go and see this business owner." And he and I had chatted about just business, and we were pretty aligned. And I said, "Well, why don't we go over there and form basically a business?" And so before we had an LLC, before we had a bank account or anything, we went and talked. This guy's name's Frank, and we pitched him on this idea. And Frank said, "Well, how much is it?" And we said, biggest number we could come up with at the time. We said 5,000 a month. He said, done. And so he wrote us a check, and we had to take about a month before we could cash it because we didn't have an LLC or anything. The next client we had paid us 4,000 a month, and so we were going the opposite way. I say that what we really were doing is we were outsourced COOs. I mean, those two business owners wanted to leave the business. So we actually stepped in and ran the business. And so while it sounded good at the time, we thought we were like, man, this is great. We're making like $4,500 a piece. Just going to the businesses, it wasn't scalable. And so that was in 2000, late 17, early 2018. And then from there, I ended up picking up private clients, and I ended up getting that. COVID helped with this, admittedly. I ended up with in late 2020, 22 private clients, and it was too many. And so I actually had to take my own principles and put them in a package because I was just saying the same things over and over and over again. And so we launched Blueprint OS officially in October of 2021. So from late 17, we can almost say 2018 through 2021, I was just doing private coaching.
And so, technically, it was 2017 the business started. How old were you then?
I was 30, 2017, I was 36.
36, great. And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business over those 7 years?
Yeah. So you and I were talking about this before we hit record. All of the businesses that I've been a part of are bootstrap. So I've not taken outside investment in. Nothing wrong with that at all. That's just not the world that I've known. And so you have to be able to balance both growth and profitability. And early in my career, I thought growth equaled profit, but the reality is growth eats profit. So how do we balance the two of those? How do we make sure that we're continuing to grow and profit? And so we use the rule of 40, the combined year over year growth and profitability. And from 2016, the year after I was in Toronto, through to today, every company that I've been a part of, sans the one company that I closed, has been able to achieve a rule of 40 number of 40 or greater.
Well, Bradley, that's amazing. Well done. And for the audience, I was saying before we hit record, that rule of 40, I heard it on a podcast. VCs and private equity firms often use it as a good rule of thumb of what companies to invest in because they want high growth companies. So if it's that 40% can either be 30% top line growth and a 10% EBITDA, or it might be a 20% top line and a 20% EBITDA. The two numbers need to obviously add to at least 40. So that's brilliant growth. Well done.
Yeah, Blueprint OS has been over 70 the last 3 years of both growth and profit. I want to share with you, just for your listeners too, is that we believe the minimum of both year over year growth and profitability, the minimum should be 10.
Yeah.
And so when I think about if we're going to grow and we're going to really expand, let's say we're going to do 40% growth, but that doesn't mean I want my profit to be zero. I at least want profit to be 10% minimum 10%. Now, we've typically will build or architect in the language that we use, will build off of a 25% net margins for the businesses that we have. And so if then we can combine, this is important, 26%. So it's very close. So 26% year over year growth, we can double a business in 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So for listeners, if you take any number, so you're doing 750 and you want to double that business in 3 years and want to go from 750 to 1.5, you need 26% compounded growth year over year. And oftentimes when a business owner sees the math behind that, because they just haven't done the math on it, they're like, oh, well, that's way more doable than I actually thought. It's not easy, but it is more doable. So a lot of times we'll build a model off of a rule of 40 of 50. We'll try to hit 26% year over year for 3 years, and we'll try to hit 25% profit. And if we can hit a 51% rule of 40, that business is cooking.
That's great. Fantastic. And how many full-time equivalent team members did you start with, and where are you at now for BlueprintOS?
Well, obviously, depending on with BlueprintOS, we've got 4.25 FTEs
Yep.
for BlueprintOS specifically. I believe business is a team sport. I picked that up from Daniel Priestley. So I do not believe that business around just being a solopreneur. And so everybody we work with is in that revenue range, but also has to have a team. Now they can be VAs or contractors, but we really believe that business is a team sport. We used to work with a couple of solopreneurs, and if you just can't get somebody in the mindset of building and trying to bring on a team, it's really difficult. And so over time, the most I've been able to have across all the portfolio companies has been around 16 and a half FTEs.
Yeah, fantastic. And was it for BlueprintOS, was you and your business partner both full-time, or was kind of part-time down to one FTE across the both of you?
It's actually one of the businesses that has been a part of it, but he and I parted ways whenever I started the Hamner Group. So that business was actually called Iron Sharp Principles, and so he's actually not part of that business anymore.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
One of the most important things I think you can do for yourself, the most important thing you can do for yourself as a business owner is to protect your confidence. And the reason is because business is really, really effing hard.
Yep.
And I will tell you the two specific times that I have to stop and look backwards is weekly at Sunday night planning to find wins, and quarterly, because we run everything on a quarterly rhythm, is week 13 of every quarter is to look back and to find the wins. And if I do not do that, I do not feel like I am succeeding or winning. And so it was so the simple answer could be, well, the first time I got a business to 1 million, I mean, that was a huge milestone to be able to get it there. But the reality is, it's interesting that once we have achieved some goals that we have, that how my mind will immediately go to what's the next one. And so that's why I struggle with, I have to be able to find the wins weekly and quarterly in the business, because I just love the journey of it versus, if I said, well, the first time I hit X amount of personal income, X amount of times we hit revenue, yeah, it was good to celebrate it for a period of time, but then we were just on to to bigger goals.
What does success look like to you?
Time with family, freedom, 12 weeks off in a year, a business that is growing and profitable and allowing me to do the things that I really want to spend time doing by having an executive assistant to help me buy back my time. And I really feel mission driven doing what it is that we're doing now, specifically with BlueprintOS. So if I have time to play golf, if I have time, the ability to not miss my kids' baseball games, basketball games, golf, dance for my daughter, if I can do all of those type of things, work in the business at the things that I really love to do, such as podcast guesting, and I have a business that's profitable and it's growing, that's success.
Well, mate, if you're into golf, there's even more reason for you to make it down here to Tasmania. We've got 3, soon to be 4 world-class golf courses. 3 are in the top 50. Number 1 course in Australia has been a good mate of mine, opened that 20 years ago this December, actually. So I'll send you my Tasmania document to entice you down here to play a bit of golf as well as doing some bushwalking.
Is that Royal Melbourne?
No, this is Tasmania. We're an island south of Melbourne, about 500,000 people, 2/3 of the state's national park.
Gotcha.
So There's two great golf courses, world class, on a smaller island just off Tasmania called King Island, and then there's two other courses in the northeast of Tasmania called Barnbougle Dunes and Lost Farm. And there's a new golf course opening up near the airport in Hobart here down south called 7 Mile Beach, which an ex-PGA golfer from Tasmania has just opened. So you'll see that all in my document. Great
Oh, I
courses.
can't wait.
All links courses too, very challenging, particularly the winds around the islands makes it very Scottish feel to it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love to play. It's been great. That's one of the things, if I look back years ago, that I got away from. I played golf in college, and so I love to play. My son loves to play now. He's 13 going on 14. And it's so healthy and refreshing for me to be able to step away. But when I was in that period of time, Troy, I didn't play. I started to let all of my activities go. I really wasn't taking care of my health. I wasn't working out. I wasn't doing activities I love to do. I wasn't going to college football games. That's a big part of what we do. I was just working all of the time. And so having other hobbies, I mean, look, I don't know if I love business. I love business. I love the challenge of it. I love to read about it. I love to listen to podcasts like yours, which is fantastic. I love to study business. It's an incredible challenge. Entrepreneurship, I think, is one of the biggest challenges there is in life. Leading a team is a challenge. Connecting with your audience is a challenge. All of it is a challenge, and I love it. But sometimes I need to be able to have an outlet like golf or like kids activities, I think for a lot of business owners they don't want to choose. I don't want to choose a business that's growing and sacrifice all of these other things, but I don't want to just focus on that and not have a business that's growing as well. Like the reality is, the business gives me access to the freedom and flexibility ultimately I always wanted.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
I think you got to get really clear on who your ideal client is. I think you've heard that before.
Yep.
I think if you get really clear about who your ICA is, ideal client avatar is, then everything begins to go downstream from that specifically. Your marketing messaging, your positioning, et cetera. If you can get really clear on who it is that you want to serve and specifically how you serve them, the problem that you solve for those business owners, the better. It was really early on when I was doing one-to-one coaching. I'm grateful for that because that's the time I was working through my methodology and positioning. I wasn't able to tell you. We work with cyberspace business owners doing 300,000 to 3 million. I kind of liked the idea of positioning myself that, oh, I can help anybody. The reality is that's not true.
Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. Very important to get very clear on your avatar. Totally agree with that. How did you fund your business? You mentioned bootstrapping, but you've also brought investors on or partners on in some of those businesses.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that there's a tremendous amount of value in sweat equity, meaning specifically if you have somebody on the team, either being able to give them sweat equity, they actually have equity in the company, or I don't know if you've talked about on your podcast much, phantom equity, to be able to have equity to where it's not actual shares in the company, but it acts like it as a profit share. So I've not taken on any outside investment, but I have had, even within BlueprintOS, I'm a 100% equity holder, but I have actually a couple of my clients who have turned coaches, they're associate coaches who have expressed an interest in wanting to be able to make an investment in the company. And so we've got a couple milestones that when we tick those off from a revenue perspective, I think the valuation will be right for me to be able to bring on some other investors into the company and to be able to really grow and scale it even more.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think specifically coaching and consulting is clearly a growing uh, business. There's no question about it. I think as long as you position yourself appropriately, I think that there's a lot of business coaches out there, or even life coaches out there that have not done the thing. They've actually not been in business themselves. They've not grown a business. And so they're trying to teach other people how to do business. And I don't think that that works. I think if you can speak from genuine experience, I know Alex Hormozy talks about that, that if you've actually done the thing in business, then you can just talk about what it is that you've done as opposed to telling people what to do. But yes, I do believe that coaching, and really coaching is a sub segment, Troy, of education. And as much as I love, the college that I went to, Auburn University, as much as I love that, I think education in the way that it's been in the States for a long time is changing a lot. And so I think at the end of the day, coaching consulting is going to be something that's growing because people are going to continue to want to try to find different ways to educate themselves and develop and grow.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
What was the most stressful part?
Yeah.
Well, it was definitely the part I mentioned in 2015. There's no question about it. I mean, that was rock bottom for the business. I wasn't making very much money personally. The business was not profit. I mean, it was maybe break even at that point. What also is not, I didn't discuss earlier, is the culture was awful. I mean, the culture was terrible. I didn't have the respect of the team. I was a really bad leader. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was work. And my answer to everything was to work harder.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
The podcast has helped with this a lot. Is learning how to ask better questions and listen. No question about it.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
I think the thing that is, I would say, the least is, but it's also probably been the biggest challenge at the same time, is learning how in the last 4 years to grow a company, keep a culture with all remote employees. That is not something I was accustomed to. All of the other businesses was hands on, I was in person with the team. And so learning how to develop, instill, culture in an organization that was a with that's all remote, that was really difficult for me to try to figure out in the early days starting out. I did not know how to do that. COVID obviously accelerated that for a lot of people in 2020, 2021, which I'm grateful for, but that was a new skill set. And so it's still been one of those things where, asynchronous communication's great, but sometimes I love to be able to jump on a call with somebody on the team to be able to work through versus just say Zoom calls as an example. There's never any substitute for being in person. So that has certainly been a great thing and also a challenge at the same time.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
The impact that you make on your team and your community, into your customers. I mean, if you do it right, I believe you and I were talking about this before. I think business, I specifically think small business and entrepreneurship are the ones that ultimately make a difference in the world. I don't think it's big corporate companies, and I don't think it's
Government.
government entities that make a difference. I think it is small business. I believe in that wholeheartedly. And so the difference that you make in being able to allow your team members to buy houses, to upgrade the neighborhood that they're in, to buy a new nice car, for their kids to be able to go to a different school, there is such a ripple effect that is hard hard to understate.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Mosey's big on that point as well, that, small businesses are going to have the greatest impact. It's already most developed nations, the preponderance of jobs are created and held by small businesses. A lot of people don't realize that. It's not big corporates and it's not government.
No question.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, I think, but it was a mindset shift. We call it now an identity shift, but it was a mindset shift first, is that I needed to see myself differently. I saw myself as the one that was doing all of the things. I did not see myself as the builder of the systems or even the builder of people in the business. I was the single source of truth. I was the single source of truth. And so when you start to see the identity shift that you make, you start to think, instead of me doing this, how can I create an asset? How can I create and develop a system? How can I create a process around this so it's not dependent upon me? Without a question, that's the biggest one that biggest mindset shift. We call it identity shift that I made.
the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Paradoxically, Troy, when we started our businesses, we got into it for some level. I got into it for this, and then I stayed in it for this freedom and flexibility. Some level of freedom, flexibility, and income potential. That's why we got into it for most everybody. How you got into business is going to be different. So the reason I say that is because that flies in the face of what I'm about to say, and that is process, structure, and routine. So on one hand, we got into it for freedom and flexibility. And so when you hear someone like myself talking about process, structure, and routine in the business, those two things don't necessarily always go together. And the realization is everything that I wanted, everything that a small business owner wants is on the other side of process, structure, and routine. And so to me, that is specifically, I think, what a small business owner needs to develop and maintain. How do we have process? How do we have structure? And how do we have routine in the business? Because the team and the business is desperately begging for it.
Yep, totally agree. Do you need a guide on how to build your own money printing marketing machine? Do you feel like marketing is a mysterious art, only cracked by a chosen few? Fear not, we get it. Mastering marketing can be like taming a dragon. Download a copy of the Marketing Funding Flywheel ebook, which has 41 pages packed with over 50 tools and tips for your business. Let's get into it. Head to growasmallbusiness.com. We have plenty of resources waiting for you in the footer of our website. Can you talk how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
So I think I said this earlier. So we try to go back to maxims that we really believe in. One of them is I believe that business is a team sport, fundamentally. Business is a team sport. So when you think about this, if you're doing the two phases I mentioned to you earlier, I'm going to give your listeners a couple of things and challenges that they face at one of those levels, and then the second one that they face at the other. So if you're between 300,000 and a million, as much as somebody like a Hormozy can talk about bringing on somebody on his acquisition.com team that makes $1 million a year, makes $500,000 a year. The reality is if your business is doing between 300 and a million, you're not even remotely
Mm,
hiring somebody at that level. You don't have the funds
mm,
to do it. So therefore, you're paying people well, but one of the most important skills that you need to be able to have to give that team member is what to do. What to do. They can't read your mind, but they can read a document. Hence, documentation, systems, and processes become so critical at that level because you got to document what it is you're doing, which is why the first 300,000, if that's what you want to do, you can do it by yourself.
mm.
You can do it by yourself. Maybe you can get it to 500,000 by yourself, but that's going to be about it. Secondly, the skill set, Troy, changes, in my opinion, at a million. At a million, because of a word that you and I both use, FTEs, full-time equivalents, depending on where you're at revenue per person, you probably north of a million start to get more than 6 FTEs. And because of that, when you're at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you now have your first level of management. And so now you're faced with the first challenge, which is now how do I lead leaders? And that's starting to happen at a million, million and a half, $2 million in revenue. So that skill set really begins to change. And so specifically at 300,000 to a million, documentation to give your team so they know exactly what it is that you want them to do, clear expectations. At a million plus, you're typically hiring your first managers on the team, and you now have to learn how to lead leaders, and that's a different skill set.
What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Okay. When we think about culture, we think about a performance culture, performance culture. So I'll give you two based off of a culture, performance culture. One, we believe in core 4 values. I know people have talked about core values, I'm sure, on your podcast. We believe there needs to be 4 of them. It does rhyme, but it also makes it incredibly easy to remember. So we recommend having 4 values that represent your culture. Secondly, if you heard me saying things like business is a team sport, ideas are everywhere, implementation is everything. Those are what we call maxims. So those are embedded in our culture as well. Those are things that we believe just specifically about the business. So when you pair up core values plus maxims and some other things, but those 2 things specifically help you to be able to develop a performance culture. And I tell you what, I will give you a third one. We call it OTA. So maxims, core values, and OTA. Clear outcomes, clear transparency, and clear accountability. Clear outcomes, clear transparency, clear accountability. So with that, we start all of our meetings even before we celebrate wins. We hop on a call. How's everybody doing? Good to see you. Okay, great. What's clear outcomes for this meeting? And that helps to embed a culture of performance because everybody is clear before we even get started. Why are we even having this meeting? So there's 3 things for a culture building.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance. I know you've touched on this early on. It was pretty shit.
Yep. Perfect, repeatable week. Design or architect your week to where there are barriers in your time. Now, there are exceptions to this. It is 7:30 in the States when I'm recording this. That obviously comes up, but what are specifically the rules that you have in place or the guidelines that you run off of? I don't take meetings before 10 a.m. I need that time for maker creator time. And I don't like to take meetings after 4 p.m. because my kids' schedule. So my week, Monday through Thursday, effectively, I have between 10 and 4. Now, for everybody listening, your days are going to be totally different. But the reality is shrinking that time has made me more effective because I only have 6 hours, 4 days a week, and I have a couple hours on Friday to be able to fit things in. I use my time more wisely. So I would encourage your audience to actually build what is called your perfect repeatable week. Because if you don't know what one looks like, you're never going to have it.
Yep. How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
I have probably spent realistically at least a $500,000 in my own coaching fees, plus hotels, flights, meals, etc. Have at least been about a $500,000, and I believe that that's been the best investment that I've ever made is in myself.
Have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
Oh yeah, all of that professional development. I mean, has been in other coaches that have helped me along the way. And I told somebody this before on a podcast that some of the ones I've gotten such tremendous value out of, and other ones I didn't. And the only constant thing in all of those was me. And whenever I showed up the right way, did the work, decided I was going to be one of the best clients, didn't miss meetings, and just did what they asked me to do, those are the ones that I've gotten the most out of. And so I believe never trust a coach who doesn't have a coach.
It's good. Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
Yeah, so I have a board of advisors that is made up of all other business owners and specifically people that are doing more than what it is I'm doing. And so those are 4, happen to be all men in my life that know all of our business financials and speak into my life about the role that I'm doing and really around not just business financials, but really all of the aspects, the things that you've asked me around, time off, balance, how health, my relationships with my family, et cetera. And so that has been one of the very best things. And that's not paid. We also hold that role for each other. And that's been an incredible asset to have.
So it's like peer advisory boards.
It's a peer advisory
Yeah,
board.
that's
Yeah.
great. Great idea. Mm.
Yeah, and we all signed. I mean, we did it professionally because we wanted to take it seriously. So we all signed NDAs for that. And we meet quarterly, and we have to bring our numbers, and we have to have, we have real conversations. So outside of paid coaches that I've invested in, that has been one of the very best things that I've ever done.
Mm. So does that take like a whole day to go through all 4 or 5 businesses?
Yeah, for sure. Here's the thing: the way that we do it though is we'll go play golf and we'll have dinner, and so we actually make it a day that we look forward to. Now, if we just did the businessy stuff, valuable, okay, we would look forward to that. But when you wrap it with, hey, we're going to go and spend, 4 or 5 hours doing a deep dive of this, and then we're going to wrap it with go play golf in the afternoon. Typically, is what we do. So we start early. We'll go play golf and then have dinner afterwards. That ends up becoming a great day that we look forward to once a quarter.
Yeah, I love that. Great. All right, Bradley, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Leading a team.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
The Road Less Stupid, Keith Cunningham.
Not read that one, just putting it on my list now. Thank you. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
I think your podcast is fantastic. I would tell you that Built to Sell is an incredible podcast. I really love that one.
Absolutely. Have you read John's 3 books?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. I listen to 3 or 4 of his podcasts a week to get through the back catalogue. I've got about 170 to go now. We've had John on our cast twice on this main format, talking about his business journey, but also I'm going to have Quickfire Friday, just talking about exiting businesses, and phenomenal material in there. And I'm surprised how few people, I didn't hear about it until several guests mentioned it on this podcast. So it's 4 of the top 10 books of my favorite books now have come from guests on the podcast, and Built to Sell is one of them.
Yeah, I mean he's great. I was actually a certified value builder for several years, and I guess technically I am still, so I know that methodology, and that's been incredibly helpful. While we don't integrate his methodology of certified value builder into specifically what we do, because of the point I made earlier about being really clear about who we serve, who we help, who we like, what they're trying to do in the business. But for my own education and helping both for my portfolio companies as well as working with others, that insight has been incredibly helpful. So I love John's stuff.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Well, it's so obvious. One, I'll give you 2 if that's okay. I mean, you got to have a really great CRM. You got to have a really great CRM, and not only that, pay somebody to build the dang thing out for you the right way. If you have HubSpot and you're driving it like a Prius, it's a Ferrari that you can't drive like a Prius. Like, you got to build it out the right way. But that goes true for any CRM. And so, pay somebody the $4,000 or $5,000 to go build that thing out for your business the right way, and then that thing will cook. The second one, you got to have a communication tool that is central for everybody. We obviously love Slack, and so we communicate pretty much everything: voice message, text messages. We're really structured in how we communicate in Slack. In other words, like, there's best practices and protocols for how we utilize Slack with certain channels, because otherwise, even that, as an example, can become a mess if you don't have rules around it. So our Slack is really clean. So I'd say Slack and a really great built out CRM.
Well, on my favorite question, what would you tell yourself on day 1 of starting out 14 years ago?
You can't do it all yourself, Bradley. You're talented, you work hard. That is great. It's never how hard you work, it's what you work on. Everything you're going to get in business is going to be through your ability to drive results through other people, not just on your own ability alone.
Thanks so much for your time today, Bradley. Really enjoyed our chat. Congratulations to you on the growth of your portfolio of 6 companies. I know one didn't quite make it, but over 40% growth across all those companies each year, some even higher, is phenomenal, and up to 16 FTE across the group. Plus, you're helping a lot of other business owners in the 300,000 to 3 million range grow their businesses. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the quality of questions. You're a pro.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.